top 11 fantasy novels of all time. I chose 11 because I couldn't keep it to 10. If you love fantasy novels, you need to check this video out. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and all that fun stuff. Let's do it. Welcome back to Great Stories Change the World. This is the YouTube channel where I go over great stories and why they are important. Now, I'm an author MB Mooney. I write science fiction and fantasy. So today I'm going to go over the top 11 fantasy novels of all time according to me and why they are important, why I like them. So not going to waste your time. We're just going to get right into it. At number 11, we have The Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. This is book number 3 in the Harry Potter series, and I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed this one because I really think this one got a little more mature, got a little darker. I like the time travel stuff. I like just some of the things they kind of got into with this book with the elf and Dobby and all that sort of stuff. Now, this is one of my favorites of the whole series, and so I picked this one. Now, obviously, we could talk about the whole amazing thing that J.K. Rowling did with the Harry Potter series, but this is the book from her that I am choosing. That's number 11, okay? Number 10, I have Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine Lingle. Now, she has written a lot of great books, and this is probably her most favorite. And this could have been a science fiction book, but I put it in the fantasy category because a lot of the characters, a lot of the settings, a lot of it is very fantastical. I know there's time travel, and so that could put it in the sort of science fiction slot, but I chose it for fantasy for a lot of those reasons, of the creatures and different things that are in the book. And this has got a great theme, great stakes with trying to find the dad and their kids and trying to be resourceful and kind of discover this other world. I love this one. All right, that's number 10. Number 9 is another classic, The Hobbit, all right, by J.R.R. Tolkien. And of course, a lot of people know this one. He is one of the pioneers, if not like the great master of modern fantasy. Now, he wrote this one more for little kids, not small kids like 3 or 4, but he wrote this more as a children's book. But he had done a lot of the world building, and you can kind of see that in this book. And it is a little more action oriented. It's not as much about, the overall characters, although there is some great character development that's in this one. But again, The Hobbit is amazing. I highly recommend the cartoon from the 70s. If you want to watch like a movie visual based on this, the cartoon I think is even better than the trilogy that Jackson did. But The Hobbit, all right? Classic. Number 9. Now, number 8, we've got Return of the King, again by Tolkien. Now, he's one of the people who show up twice on my list because, again, like, he's the master. Like, he's kind of like the Beatles of fantasy, right? Most people, even if they don't like the Beatles, man, they have borrowed from something that the Beatles did. And it's the same way with Tolkien and his fantasy, especially Lord of the Rings. The world building that he did, the languages, the characters, the creatures, the good versus evil, the kind of the epic scale, the trilogy. There's so much that he did with Lord of the Rings that was, again, we just all copy it to some degree. Now, with Return of the King, I picked this one specifically because everything comes together so well in this last book. And I just remember the first time I read this, I think I read it almost all in one sitting. It was just so engaging. And one of the most amazing things about this book is he puts a love story in the midst of all this epic climactic sort of stuff with all the world stuff that's going on. He kind of takes it down into this really intimate love story between Faramir and Éowyn, and it works. It breaks all the rules, but he makes it work. So this is number 8, Return of the King. Now we're going to another classic with C.S. Lewis, And of course, his Narnia series is right up there with The Lord of the Rings as far as kind of foundational for fantasy. And his is more allegorical, although C.S. Lewis really didn't like allegory, didn't like for people to call it an allegory. But The Voyage of the Dawn Treader is my favorite of the whole series, and I love the whole series. I love every one of these Narnia books. I like his science fiction trilogy as well. But this one is probably my favorite for a lot of different reasons. Number one, I love Eustace as a character. They kind of bring him in. How he goes from really annoying and sort of selfish to more of a hero there towards the end, his redemptive arc and how he becomes a dragon, spoiler alert, and how that changes. And I love Reepicheep and how they get to the end of kind of the world and Aslan and that whole interaction there towards the end of the book. There's just so much of this that I like, and it's just such a great book. So this is number 7, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Now we're getting into number 6. Number 6, we have The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Now, Brandon Sanderson is kind of the modern, most popular guy author with fantasy. I mean, he's busted GoFundMe or whatever he busted with his GoFundMe just last year ago during the pandemic and all that sort of stuff, where he came out with these books that he just magically had written. But he is a master at storytelling. I don't consider him one of the best writers in the sense of like his mechanics and just the prose side of it. It's very simple. But the storytelling and the twists that he brings in and the characters, he's just a master at it. And that's what keeps people interested and keeps the pages turning. So Way of Kings is the first in the Stormlight Archive. Kaladin is kind of the character that keeps us going. Sanderson got into more the epic fantasy, especially when he started kind of writing the end there for Robert Jordan. For the Wheel of Time. I think he really kind of honed in on all that stuff that made the world building and all the stuff that made Wheel of Time so great, and he just kind of applied it to his own sort of world here. And great book, great first book in a series, a great series overall. All right, that was number 6. Now we're getting into number 5. Now this is definitely not a children's book. Okay, so a lot of the other ones probably your teens or kids could read. This is a little bit more of the kind of the grim dark sort of stuff that's been coming out in the last 10 or 20 years. This is George Martin and Storm of Swords. Now, this again is the third of the series, and it's my favorite because, man, some of the most epic stuff happens in this book. And I don't want to give all the spoilers, but man, the stuff that happens with Tyrion and the stuff that, like the Red Wedding was in book 2, and that was pretty major and a pretty just like a shocking, like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But there's even more of those moments in this book. There's betrayal. There's just all sorts of stuff that's going on. Again, I don't want to give the spoilers, but this is the best of the series. I've read them all, and I don't think Martin is ever going to finish the series for a lot of different reasons, but I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, and this is my favorite, all right? Where just a lot of the character and the action and the twists that are happening. It's my favorite, right? That is number 5. Number 4, Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. Now, some of you may think, of course, he's got to have Robert Jordan in there, although there's probably some classic fantasy authors that I don't have in this list. But Robert Jordan, I love the Wheel of Time series. I am with everybody who has ever read it. If you read the Wheel of Time, you get it, right? There are pages you don't necessarily skip, but you just kind of skim. Like, his world building is so intense and so intricate. And his descriptions are just like, he's just putting Tolkien to shame, man. I mean, he just takes it all to a whole another level, right? And I like this one. This is Fires of Heaven. This is book 5. I could have easily picked any of them from about book 3, 4, 5, 6. This is one of my favorites because a lot of the characters are established by this point, and there's a lot more action. So there's a Balefire is introduced to sort of the magic thing, magic lasers. I mean, come on, that's just cool. And there's a lot more action in this one, and where a lot of the world building and the discovery that we've seen over the last few books really just, you don't have to do a lot of that in this book because it's been done for 4 books, really thick books. And so now you just get the action, and it's action oriented. And there's a lot of Matt Cawthon, who's my favorite. One of the downside of this particular one in the series is there's not a lot of Perrin. In fact, I don't think Perrin's in it at all, which is kind of a negative for this book. But still, overall, I like this one because, the world building doesn't slow it down. Just kind of, man, now we're into the action. So really like that one. That's number 4. Now, another not so kiddie book, The Blade Itself. And so this is the first book in Abercrombie's first trilogy. And man, again, this is more grimdark. So you've just got a lot of moral gray areas that are going on in here, and none of the characters are particularly good or likable, but somehow Joe makes it work. And the story is strong. The characters are good. I mean, Glokta himself is just one reason to read this book. He's so kind of dark and he's physically twisted, but there's still some sort of good in him. He's got something in him that makes us like him somehow. Just really a great book. And it's a great series, and this is a great introduction to it. And so I just kind of put this one in my list because I think it's still my favorite of the whole sort of series. All right, now we have Sanderson again. He's the other one who makes twice on my list. I mean, I tried to put some of the other classic guys, but I'm sorry, just some of these I have to put in my top. Like I could have put some of the other sort of classic guys more if I were doing like a top 20. But Mistborn was kind of world changing for me as a writer. Like Mistborn was like, that's the kind of fantasy I want to write. So if you like this kind of fantasy, you're probably going to like the kind of stuff that I write. A lot of people have compared me to Sanderson in some ways. And by the way, in the YouTube description, there's a free book that you can download if you want to check any of my writing out. But Mistborn, man, the twist at the end, just the twist throughout the story and the whole trilogy. It's well written. The world building is good, but it's kept simple enough that it doesn't really slow it down, kind of like Robert Jordan. And it's not as thick of a book. And so it just really moves. I love the main character. I like sort of the oppression theme that's going on with the emperor. And there's these people that maybe they're not quite human, but they are, right? And some have powers and some don't. It's just, there's a lot of elements within this that I found really amazing. And I've read this book several times. It's one of my favorites. Number 2, Mistborn. Now, we're getting to number 1. That's right. We're getting to number 1. This might surprise some people, but The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King is my favorite fantasy novel. Now, Stephen King came out with The Gunslinger a long time ago. And he was known for being a horror writer, horror author. Like there's stuff with the supernatural and he's done stuff about werewolves and vampires and monsters. And man, it was just huge, right? And I read everything by Stephen King for a few years there, probably up until the late 90s. And I still read a lot of Stephen King, but not everything that he puts out. But there for a while, man, I read everything. Tommyknockers, Misery. Like there was a point where he just became such a master of writing and storytelling and character. And The Gunslinger was good, but it was really short. And it was good, but it wasn't one of those like epic sort of masterpieces that you kind of like with a fantasy novel. This one is where he really gets into it, and again the third book is good too. But The Drawing of the Three is just an amazing book where he puts the main character, the gunslinger, into like the worst position, and he needs help. He's got to gather some forces to help him fight evil and all this sort of stuff. But where does he get them? And of course, he pulls from our world. So he's in this whole other sort of world, and he pulls from our world, and that's what's called The Drawing of the Three. So he's drawing these characters to himself as people that can help him fight. And I know it doesn't sound that exciting, but man, just the way King does this, I'm telling you, every time I read it, I'm just amazed at how phenomenal this book is, how it just works, it flows, and it keeps you interested, and it just keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. So that's my number 1. What would make your top 10. What are some books that would maybe make your top 10 that I didn't include? There's a lot of great authors out there that I just didn't have space for in my top 10. But just let me know in the comments what some of your top 10 are. Get the free book in the description, and check out some of my books if you like Sanderson and some of those things. A lot of people compare me to Game of Thrones and Sanderson and Narnia and some of this stuff. So if you like that sort of stuff, get the free book. Remember to subscribe. I'm going to have more videos coming at you soon, more reviews, more lists, more stuff about writing. Check it out, all right? Peace. Talk to you soon.